go.
Yes.
Good
Lane.
evening. Good evening. Good evening and welcome to the After Hours show. This is Joe in India now, from the Indian subcontinent, a nondescript kitchen in the outskirts of New Delhi. I'm joined by Ann Lee, retired college professor, Professor Adnan Hussain of the Adnan Hussain Show,
Yeah.
Marianne Cummings
Yay.
of the Parks and Recreation of Chicago. I've lost all of my notes, I'm afraid.
Aurora.
And
Fox
Jonathan.
Valley, actually much more than Aurora. It's the Fox Valley Park District,
Ooh.
biggest park district outside of the Chicago Park District, I might add.
And finally, we have Professor Jonathan Bick. Where have things gone, John? We don't
I used
know
to
what
teach. Used to
what
teach at
your
the
bio is
University
anymore.
of where did I teach? Oh, Western Connecticut State University.
There we go.
Now I'm at the University of Massachusetts.
Okay, we're still there. Welcome, everybody. This is the Professors and Marianne reboot, reuniting the professors from the former show we all used to enjoy and got together during COVID. This is our COVID pod that never ended. I'd like to talk about before the professors head on into a discussion of I don't know, one or two minor things that may have happened in the United States this week. I'd like to talk about a dish that I'll prepare silently while they kibitz. There's so many vegetables that I haven't tried since arriving. Particularly this one here, which is quite unique. Kundru, I believe it's called in Hindi, or ivy gourd. It is as if an okra and a cucumber had a baby with well, it's more like a threesome between a cucumber, an olive, and an okra. It has, when you cook it, it has almost olive-like texture and somewhat taste. It's sort of related to, let's see, the bitter gourd, but not as anywhere near as bitter. Has a quite unique consistency, little gummy when you slice it open, similar to okra, but that goes away after you cook it. It also, what was the other interesting thing? It, it's a little too early here. I just woke up at 5 a.m, so we're just rolling with it. It's a very lovely vegetable, very juicy, tender. I'm going to slice some red onion with it, some ginger. I have a number of spices. I'll probably use turmeric and cumin. And for the starch, we'll have a taro root, little tropical tuber that is in place of what should be tapioca. So the other week when I was down in Kerala, I tried a dish that is steamed tapioca that's tossed in a tempering of mustard seed and coconut oil, chili, and famed curry leaves. So has a nice yellowish white color, and we'll see how taro root holds up with that in that department. So it'll be interesting. It'll take me a while to cook this. Prepared. It's a brand new kitchen. I thank my gracious host. First time cooking in about a month or so, maybe more. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Um, I'm not sure what we would like to discuss this evening. There's
Oh, there's
hardly
no
anything going
shortage.
on from what I've heard in the news.
No shortage of topics.
Indeed.
And did you?
Oh, well, I think Harsh's most important from the chat is that you shouldn't burn the place down. I think
Uh,
it's just been a busy week. The just to go quickly, the Ukrainians offered up a ceasefire plan that is not so bad, but typically Russian Soviet kind of negotiating. The Russians rejected it, so we're back to almost square one. At least signals are getting straightened out. I think that's probably the thing that we've gotten from it. Other than people are still dying. Missiles are being flying back and forth, and that's pretty much the state of Ukraine. Poland is almost on well, they're reinforcing their military, sort of in anticipation of bad stuff happening. But they've been doing this for a while, so. And of course, without getting to the laundry list of what Donald Trump was doing, essentially trying to shake down Ukraine for all of its minerals, which hasn't happened yet. So that's a good thing. Anyway, that's Ukraine. Ukraine was they're still launching stuff, very slow drones and very fast drones. Some major hypersonic missiles have been flying around, which this yesterday got intercepted by, I think it's a German uh, 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 surface-to-air missile. And that was sort of interesting because I think it's the first time they've managed to intercept a fairly major ballistic, or not a ballistic missile, but a fairly powerful surface-to-surface missile. So anyway, that's all I'll say about Ukraine tonight. It's still there, thank goodness, or whatever. And diplomacy is sadly plodding along. I think more interesting from and I hope Adnan has a thing on it because I don't, but apparently they're going to release the leader of the PKK out of prison. That's I think an important event, that there may actually be peace relative to the Turkey and the PKK, but I'm not sure why that's happening, except perhaps the leader of the PKK is ill or something, and they want to take him off his island because I think he's been stuck on an island for like a decade or so. Um, but I've been reading some of his stuff, and it's always kind of interesting. I mean, the PKK has a women's militia or army group, which I think is really not so unique so much as it is a fairly good one. And I think that's one of the nicer things about the Kurdish resistance. But that's all I know. I defer to other folks.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting story. I don't know, 100% how to explain it. I've not been following all the details since the announcement was made. He made a statement that is important in this context. The statement was essentially, basically encouraging YPG and the rest of the PKK essentially to cut a deal,
Hmm.
basically, right? And so what this really seems to me to be is a gambit by the Turks for resolving the situation with the Kurds in Syria. Now that that is a sort of zone of competition for influence in Syria, there's a kind of scramble for Syria, as it were, since Turkey has this dominant position as sponsors of HTS, the, former ISIS, former
Oh, yeah,
Al
former
Qaeda.
ISIS. Yeah.
Yeah, very
They didn't
former.
retire from that
Yeah,
You
job.
ever get to
exactly.
be? No one ever gets to be former ISIS,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So basically, I think they're, scrambling with other groups to try and consolidate a dominant position in Syria. So that seems to me the reason why Abdullah Öcalan, also known, I think, as Apo, um, is being released, and he clearly, after many years of being incarcerated and maintaining a kind of principled stance of not surrendering and nor encouraging the movement for Kurdish national liberation, has finally decided to play ball. And I think it really all has to do with Turkey's status in Syria. I don't think it's
Yeah.
like some other, I don't think there's anything else really going on with that. But Syria
Mhm.
itself, of course, needs to really be discussed. I don't know what people on this channel have been talking about, but when HTS swooped out of Idlib with Ukrainian drones and US intelligence assisting and Turkish intelligence assisting them, and managed to catch the Assad government completely weakened by years and years of sanctions after the whole civil war. Um, and it collapsed so quickly. There were all of these celebrations of how this was a chance for Syria to finally be free of the ghosts of the past and rebuild itself towards freedom. And even many, many people who were on the left, supposedly, and pro Palestine were celebrating and actually trying to silence people who raised questions or issues about whether having Al Qaeda, ISIS, Takfiri jihadis as the de facto rulers of Syria would turn out well for the Syrian people. We were, many of us, told, oh, you have to be happy that Assad is gone. And I wasn't that happy. I was, never liked, the Assad government, except in one respect, that they managed to keep secular, united, independent Syria together that opposed US and Israeli expansionism in the region. So they were the one state that didn't normalize. And I thought on those principles, it was, of course, an important counterweight in the region. But that's, of course, exactly why it suffered, a decade or more of interference, of proxy war. Um, and so, what we're seeing now with the genocidal attack on the Alawis in particular, but also Christians, Shia, Druze, by this kind of dominant, and also Sunnis who disagree or who aren't completely on board for an incredibly extreme government. They're all being, slaughtered and pushed aside, and this was totally predictable, and it has reintroduced in a very vicious way a kind of sectarian division in the region that we saw being stoked in the last decade, but there had been signs of it being of starting it's starting to be repaired. There was, for example, the Saudi-Iran normalization deal brokered by China. This was a kind of very positive step that suggested that the sectarian division of the Sunni powers against this Shia crescent, as they would say, that had been unleashed ever since, really, you could say, the U.S. invasion of Iraq. That's kind of what unleashed this new kind of sectarianization of politics, first in Iraq and then more broadly regionally. It was pursued. It looked like that was starting to subside. There were like positive signs of a regional sort of peace and cooperation. All that, of course, was fragmented as a result of the October 7th attack and the Israeli response, and the way in which, really the only powers that stood firm in resistance were ones that were aligned with Iran and as kind of Shi'i, Yemen, southern Lebanon, Iraq, Syria. These are all, well, Syria has Shia and it has like the Alawis, so kind of religious orientation, a kind of different sect. But it's basically that is the axis of resistance. And so it has resectarianized politics, and then that has taken a completely, different turn in terms of intensity with the Syria situation. So I think that's something that's going to be dismal. I expect and I said at the time that one of the only ways this might work out is the Balkanization of Syria and breaking apart. And I think we're starting to see that. HTS was never in a position to be able to be a kind of governing force that could hold Syria together, because they pursue such a path of persecution of religious others that it was always going to be centripetal, and that's, I think, what we're seeing. They managed in the first few months, and in fact, actually, I think it was always expected, and it's perfectly fine with the United States, and works wonderfully to the interests of Israeli expansionism, because in the beginning, as long as they could gain some sort of acceptance by being a little bit restrained, after a few months, it would actually work to the benefit of Israel and the United States' interests, because not only did they get rid of the one government in the neighboring region that still maintained a principled stance of demanding, restoration of territory lost in 1967, and a comprehensive peace deal rather than a piecemeal kind of set of Abraham-type accords. But the extremism of HTS provides the rationale, for Israel to say, oh, these are, crazy, barbaric, we have to preserve our security. So we're going to have to take more territory. We're going to have to demilitarize all of southern Syria. And we've been seeing that there are now increasing demands for all kinds of overflight, privileges, and so on. And Israel has announced that basically south of Damascus there can be no Syrian arms, right? So this is, it seems to me, the situation, and I just cannot believe that, if you've been watching what's been happening for the last decade and a half, how many people were really taken in by the promise of liberation for Syria by toppling the Assad government. I mean, it's just crazy.
There's that video of who was it? The guy who was the NATO head of NATO, Wesley Clark. It was a very famous video. I mean,
Yeah.
it was done around, in the early in 2000s, when he's talking about, he's coming to Washington, and it was right after 9/11, and somebody pulls him aside and says, oh, you wouldn't believe it, but they have plans. They have plans to go into Iraq, and they have plans to go into Syria, and then Libya. And I mean, he's like, they want to start 7 wars. And he goes, what? And it's like, no, when you think about it, that's been our foreign. But no, of course, I don't think anybody in this Zoom really believes that the U.S. foreign policy was ever founded on the spread of democracy or human rights concerns. This was always about resource access. And
Mm.
lately, we're 4% of the population, and there is still the predominant philosophy in the State Department now, and in part due, I think, to those famous or infamous headless snails. Remember when the Bush Cheney administration fast-tracked all these people into, they bypassed the usual number of years people needed to get seniority into the State Department and our national securities. We referred to them as the headless snails. They're in there. And they believe that, the only way their primary belief is that this must be a unipolar world. And America must be the primary driver of foreign policy. And the only way that happens when you're 4% of the population and the rest of the world is developing, time is marching forward. You need to be very destructive. So we go in there, we destroy Libya. We've destroyed Syria. We destroyed Yugoslavia. I mean, where's that on a map? And that's gone. In other words, and then we pushed economic policies that just really destabilize governments. We've gone in and what's recently been in the news is the defunding of USAID and NED. But those of us who've been following a lot of these developments, like in Bolivia and in Mexico, and like AMLO came out last year just really condemning USAID, as did Evo Morales several years ago, because even though, yes, they may be pushing some legitimate charities, they're really there for regime change purposes. And nothing good. I mean, nothing ever has come out of a US regime change policy, be it either these color revolutions or like the descriptions in the book, Confessions of an Economic Hitman. I read that several years ago. I didn't believe it then. I believe it now. Or just outright, just taking, well, we just occupy like 1/3 of Syria. We got an army base there. We basically have been stealing their oil and have been in control of most of their arable land for, I think that was Obama. I think that was 2016 we did that. I don't know. I mean, neither party ever questions any of this crap. It really doesn't change much. Although, I would say that the President Dick Cheney was a little bit audacious in what he was doing. But the reality is, so I didn't know,
Everything's
yeah,
everything's proceeding as planned for the project for the New American Century. It was just delayed a
it
little bit,
sure
though.
is. And there was a series of articles. I think he was writing at the Gray Zone at the time, but who is this guy? Ben Norton was writing about, the writings of several neocons, the Robert Kagan, principal among them, that's Victoria Nuland's husband. Basically, their long-term plan is to eventually destabilize Russia and break that up into several regions, and then destabilize China the same way. Destabilize Russia. Yeah, that's, ask Napoleon about that. But I mean, but these guys really have these
Speaking of
plans. I
dividing and
really believe
conquering,
oh, what's that? What are you holding up in our
this
faces there?
this is the I this is the ivy gourd, is what it looks like inside. It's like a miniature
Cucumber.
melon slash cucumber. It's very
Slash olive?
juicy. Yeah,
I don't
mean,
get the olive
slash
part.
olive. It's very, very, very.
Maybe it's a little oily.
The texture, once it becomes cooked, it has the texture of an olive.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
One question on the Free Syria Army: did they agree to join um, the government forces as a group, not individually, after these atrocities started happening, or was this? I'm not sure about the timeline there.
Yeah, I'm
They
not
just
sure
dissolved.
exactly.
Mhm.
Sorry, what was that, Marianne?
They just dissolved. It turns
Yeah,
out they weren't getting paid. And I was wondering how Syria kept together as a country when we had all of their resources. I guess we know that it was just, the whole the whole country was collapsing.
Oh, did you mean the Syrian National Army?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that
The
just
Rojava
disappeared.
forces? No? Yeah.
Yeah, the
Hmm.
like,
Oh, it was dissolved.
the ones who should have been like, trying to contest HTS's
Mm.
drive from Idlib
Yeah.
down to Damascus. Yeah, though they sort of disappeared and dissolved. And a few, I mean, there were reports in a couple of weeks after that in some of the forests in the mountainous regions inland from the coast, where a lot of these massacres have been taking place recently, that they were reconstituting some kind of volunteer militia type things, but that hasn't really panned out. What has happened, what has started to happen, is regional and local militias starting to form, which is actually what touched off these cascading massacres that seem to have killed thousands in the last, couple of weeks, was that there was a major um, ambush of HTS patrols in the Latakia kind of region. 13 HTS fighters were killed in this ambush, and it unleashed this sectarian, like, tidal wave of, Sunni outrage. All of these like foreign fighters and others just like descended upon the coastal regions, going house to house, deciding or trying to determine whether, it was Sunnis or Alavis who lived there. And, if you were Christian, Alavi, or Shi'i, were subject to brutal, completely sectarian, irrational violence that had nothing to do with whether you are a former regime supporter or so-called Assad loyalist, which is a disgusting kind of technique or tactic being used in some quarters of the Western media. I saw one report or one statement from French government sources that was characterizing, these as Assad, that there were, clashes, with between Assad loyalists and HTS fighters. There's been some investigation, and I believe one news report investigated and discovered that there had been no like fire, no shots fired like by opposition against the HTS fighters. It's just a slaughter of unarmed people. Many of these areas had been demilitarized, and people had been forced to give up their weapons during the period when HTS was, moderating its rhetoric, at least from the top under Muhammad al-Julani, the, you know, currently known as Ahmed al-Shara, although I've heard from reasonably good sources, more than one source of Syrians saying that the Shara family has denied association, with him. That they don't. So they claim that he's not known to them as part of their family. But in any case, it's a very important and well-known family that has prestige, which would explain why he might have adopted that, you know, uh, uh, political name. And so, the point is that there have been militias forming in self-defense, and that is, just going to kind of create potentially the basis for splitting up the country. Is that local militias, much like this is a lot like what happened in Afghanistan.
Mm.
You have like all these kind of local warlords that will emerge as defenders of a local population. They will smuggle in arms. They will be allied with as proxies of external powers. So we're going to start to see, I think, we're going to start to see perhaps Druze militias forming in the
Mm.
south, Sueda region, and they will probably be, eventually supported and sponsored as Israeli buffer,
Mm.
as an Israeli buffer force, because they will be desperate to fight off these, what I would call, um, you know, uh, jihadi Zionists. That's what they are. Um, and to defend themselves, to keep from being completely massacred, they'll take help from wherever they can get it. And
Mm.
Israel will supply them with weapons, I think, um, under various conditions, and so that they will maintain a kind of autonomous kind of
Mm,
zone there. It's not clear to me who the Alavis will turn to. It's a little
Mm.
bit far north to be supplied easily, I think, by Israel, but it could very well be that Hezbollah will, I mean, they did defend the Christians of Ma'lula from these people
Mm.
in the past,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
if they can't themselves deploy, they might, just send, arms. The question is, what's going to happen with the Kurds in the north? Is the U.S. going to kind of betray them? Will this like Öcalan thing end up meaning that they're given some kind of like autonomy, but but have to be under Turkish tutelage? It's not clear, but I do think that some of that these regions will kind of end up breaking apart. I'm not quite sure what Turkey's play will be in this, and I think like some commentators, they may have made a big mistake in like overextending, and they're not going to
Mm.
necessarily be able to control these people. They may think that they're their kind of overlords and tutors, but these are completely, well, I was going to say they're completely unpredictable. Actually, they're completely predictable. Once given a chance, they will enact the craziest, most extreme policies.
Well, Professor Hussein, I mean, this is a weird. Now, of course, this is confusing beyond belief, and no, most Americans are just their eyes are. I mean, I remember trying to understand Lebanon in the 1970s in
Mm.
school, and like, wait a minute, which side is good? And there were like many sides, and sometimes sides would join together, and sometimes they would, join with the other guys against that one. I mean, it was crazy, and I didn't understand it. But just from strictly speaking, Turkey and America are both NATO partners, right? And the Kurds have been our allies in the region, and the Turks went after our allies in the region. What is the protocol in NATO for this kind of, proxy attack? There's
That's a great question. I mean,
their PR firms are still trying to work on that one, I'm
if
sure.
history is any guide,
Yeah.
the US will sell out the Kurds. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what they've done in the past. It
Yeah.
doesn't make sense unless there's some strategic advantage. But I mean, they will always keep the Kurds as a card to play, if
Hmm.
possible, against Turkish ambitions in the region. If Turkey becomes too independent, pursuing its own interests in ways that don't fit into US plans, then of course they will try and use the Kurds to undermine Turkey's position in Syria. And this is the problem for Turkey, is that they're trying to impose themselves on a potentially hostile population using a proxy force that is, you know, um, incapable of being controlled, and also so vicious in its draconian extremist policies that the population is going to turn against it as well, if they haven't already, begun to, really regret the loss of, kind of a normal, if repressive government. I mean, it
Mm.
was repressive, but it was like a normal government of the region. It's like, just, yeah, they all have these bad governments with, secret police who keep tabs on you. And if you, get to, rebellious about questioning the established political regime, you may find yourself being taken to an interrogation or detained, for some time, and so on. Like that's something that's a reality in all of the governments, whether they're
Mm.
pro-West or anti-West. I mean, all of the Gulf regions just the same. There's no difference. They're at least as brutal, if not more, in those two. So I think it's really hard to say. exactly, but I don't think the U.S. will risk anything for the Kurdish enclave, but it may keep them around enough to be able to be used in case they have to undermine Turkey's position. And likewise, we will see that there may be some groups that form in the area that the U.S. occupies that are sponsored by some of the Gulf regimes that may, counter HTS, because if they're Turkish aligned, the other kind of Arab regions don't really want Turkey to extend its power so fully over the rest of the Middle East. And there's been a lot of talk about fearing a neo-Ottomanism, and so on.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Well, I've got to speak out on behalf of the U.S. government here because
Because of
uh,
course you do.
you guys have been a little harsh on their work in Syria. I mean, look what they did. They had a hand in moving Syria from a highly centralized, autocratic government to a very, very decentralized group of militias that are going to kill each other.
Yeah.
Now, I think that, in order to get to democracy, you gotta
Break a few
mix it up a
eggs
little. Yeah,
to
Yeah,
make an
except they're
omelet.
pretty expensive now. Anyway, yeah.
yeah. Well, watch what you. Yeah, watch how many eggs you waste. Yeah, and the current leader of Syria, he hasn't been a member of ISIS for months now.
That's right.
So
He's
I don't know what you guys are complaining about.
he's on a very strict, ISIS Anonymous program. He's going through the steps. Exactly. Yeah. Well, one thing that we can say is very heartening from the U.S. Perspective is that they declared that they were going to privatize all of those terribly repressive institutions like the electricity utility and the rail system and so on and so all these terribly inefficient government companies that uh, were distributing food aid and things like that to the population that's been starved of the worst sanctions really in the world, the Caesar sanctions. That they're going to be, neoliberalism has finally come to Syria. It's come to many
Mm.
other parts of the Middle East. And, it was going to be an opportunity, supposedly, for investment, for reconstruction by US companies, Turkish companies. That's part of the scramble for the reconstruction. And, you know, this is just another kind of, so these people, the one thing that they could have done, but it just introduces so much instability. There'll be a handful of people who will make out like bandits, but the population is going to suffer very quickly, even worse than they have been. And, if they had been intelligent, these HTS guys, they would have tried to keep the state kind of running for a little while and hold early elections, very quick
Mm.
elections to establish some legitimacy for their rule. But they couldn't manage
Mhm.
that. They didn't do it early on, and then it was obvious that they don't have the capacities to run the state. And, they got rid of all of the bureaucrats. They started liquidating it. Um, it's just chaos. And so as a result, they declared, well, maybe we will have to have elections and it'll take us 3 years to write a constitution and we'll have elections maybe in 4 years. Right.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah, it's such a tragedy. I've lived in Syria. I spent about 7, 8 months studying Arabic there. And it was actually my
Mm.
favorite country in the Arab world. I loved it. It's just a wonderful country. People were so generous and hardworking, and it's a diverse country. I mean, this is what
Mm.
people are realizing
Mhm.
now. They had no idea what Syria was, but now suddenly they're like, oh wait, there are lots of Christians there. Oh wait, there's this group called the Druze that are different from them. Oh wait, there's these Alevis. So all of a sudden, they get this picture that it's not just some, uniform other. There's like a lot of diversity, and it was a society that managed to tolerate like 12 or 13 different Christian, denominations,
Oh,
Shi'is, Alevis, Druze, Sunni
yeah.
Muslims of all
There's an
various
old
stripes.
there's an old Syrian population in Detroit, and they're all Christian. I think it's like a Syrian Orthodox
Mhm.
Christian group that's been there since the 1800s and still has deep, I haven't talked to my friend who used to go to Damascus every year for a while. I'm sure he's not happy.
Yeah, there are a lot of Arabs. I've actually been to a Syrian Orthodox church in Detroit. It might be the one, you know.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
mine might be what my friends went to. Yeah.
yeah.
So I've got a question though for all of you guys. So what's happening in the Philippines?
Huh.
They've
Well,
dragged
they
Duterte to the ICC to The Hague.
Hmm.
yeah.
But this so I've just I'm not deeply steeped in the Philippines. I've got many Filipino friends, but basically it kind of looks like another staged democracy to me. I mean,
Mm,
it's basically the person who's now in power has deep ties with the US that and it was wasn't that Marcos Jr.? Yeah.
mm.
Yeah, that's a familiar name. Bong Bong,
Bong. Yes.
I think his name. It's kind of similar to what the US does everywhere. Now we've got democracy. And it's one of the guys in power is one of the richest families
Mm,
in the Philippines. And back I remember as a kid, back when billionaires only existed in these poor countries, there's one enormously rich person, that was the Marcos family or family, and the rest were poor. And they've got strong CIA ties and so on. I think the senior worked for, I mean, during the Cold War, he was allied with the United States. That's how he's in power. So, Bong Bong, so I think his big qualification for the job is that he's against China. There was
mm,
many
Mhm.
economic ties being formed. Duarte had, envisioned building up Philippines for the Philippines. It's like all these people. Like when people were talking to me about Hugo Chavez and in Venezuela, and he did this, that, the other thing, and I'm like, that. Look, I already know what his fundamental crime is. Like almost a million more kids are in school. There are, hundreds more hospitals and roads. That was his fundamental crime, just like the Sandinistas' fundamental crime was
mm,
actually spending money developing it on their people and
Mhm.
developing
mhm.
infrastructure. So it looks like, yeah, the US government is getting its little dominoes lined up around China. I don't know if
Well,
any
it's
of the
repairing. It's well.
it's
I don't mean to
no,
intervene.
no,
It
please.
just
I
seems
would
the
like to have
American
anybody's
government is.
insight on this.
Well, I think the U.S. government is streamlining itself to go to war at, in a very quick and, it's very typically Republican. That is, go in there, go cheap, and, a lot of shock and awe and that sort of stuff. It's just that we don't quite know where it's going to happen. I mean, it's either going to be Venezuela or Panama if they decide to really stick it to the U.S. Um, it's oh, maybe even Denmark. Who knows? I mean, but I think that they're mainly about spectacle. I think it's no different than Turkey offering itself as the place for the Ukraine-Russia negotiations as one place to do the negotiating, which I think they've generally tried to play both sides, and they've done an adequate job, I guess, of it. I'm just waiting for Trump to demand that they meet at his towers in Istanbul. I think there are a pair of, I think, Trump towers in Istanbul.
Oh, wait a minute. Are there any Trump towers in the Philippines?
Oh yes, there's a project. No, absolutely, there is a tower. It's Ivanka was behind it. That's right. There is a
Ivanka, oh,
there's
that's a long day. That's ancient.
no, I mean during the first term, they had a whole thing for it. Yeah,
Oh, really?
absolutely, a big promotion for it. Well,
Well,
that's going to be the shape of Middle Eastern politics will be unfortunately, not so different than the first term, right? That whoever we're going to attack, it's not going to be a place where Trump has something being built. Now that he has a second tower being built in Saudi Arabia, right?
I didn't even know he had a first one. Okay.
Well, he
In
has
Saudi
one, but
Arabia?
no, it's number two. It's.
In Saudi Arabia. I got where in Saudi Arabia? I
So
mean,
you're
Trump,
Well,
saying,
Saudi
it
Arabia. Yeah.
so
I
you're
think it's
saying
Riyadh, right? Isn't it?
maybe, yeah. I mean, so you're saying, and that um, the best tactic that Iran could take to escape, possible Israeli US supported attack is to immediately contract the Tehran Trump towers.
Indeed, exactly, exactly. There should be a Tehran, and Trump would treat it as a diplomatic coup of some
Right,
kind, right?
right.
I mean, that would be the basis for his Nobel Prize,
Hmm.
pitch. I mean, because
Hmm.
that's what he's been always doing. I mean, I think that this whole peace business, he knows he's been sort of put up against the wall because of his constant promises for a 24-hour settlement of the event, but he
Right.
truly does want a Nobel Prize out of this whole business. But I think that's fleeting. I
Yeah.
don't think it's going to happen.
No,
Well,
the Trump
Obama got
towers are
one.
much, I think he wants Trump towers. I think
Yeah.
that's,
That
well,
that
he's
might
not allowed to support mongers so much. It doesn't make money. That's not where he
that
gets his.
that might be a viable plan of defense for any country that the U.S. is threatening to invade. It's just put up a giant Trump sign on the tallest building in the country.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
great big T
No,
that you can see from
Just,
outer
it
space.
just to be
might be
clear,
more
Trump
likely
promised,
for a Peace Prize win than a conviction. Or oh no, he was convicted, wasn't he?
just to be clear, Trump promised peace in these countries, but in 24 hours, but didn't promise which 24 hours.
Ah,
That's
Uh,
right.
right.
That's
There you
right.
go.
Dictator for one day, but that one day keeps,
Mm.
it's Groundhog Day, so it happens every day.
Well, since we're talking about Trump, maybe we should talk a little bit
Mm.
about what's happening in the US. Um,
Well, I can tell you the most important election in the US is coming up really soon.
Mm.
And it's right here in my town of Aurora. Look at what the Illinois Democratic Party is now sending me crap like that. That's our mayor in the
What
red
the
shirt.
hell?
Yeah, that's our mayor. Richard Irvin, I've known Richard for over 30 years. Yeah, he's a Republican. I was trying to tell my friends last time my friend John Lash ran against him. John Lash is running against Richard.
okay.
We had
Cool.
a primary. It's nonpartisan, but we had a primary because there were like 6 people running, and Richard and John were the 2 top vote getters, and Richard didn't even crack 40%, which has sent it sent his campaign into shock and panic. But the now the Democrats, of course, the Democrats in Illinois, at least the local parties, do not like progressives. So they kind of quietly supported Richard
Huh.
last time around. Well, John has some big plans. He wants to tie this city in with national networks of green energy type jobs. And
Mm.
there's such a crony. I mean, we've got these things called TIFs. I don't know if you've heard of them, tax incremental financing districts. And it's a great way for well-connected companies to not pay property tax. So instead of the money that you would be paying into property tax for the schools, the libraries, the park district, uh, you you pay them into a fund. And it was originally set up so that you could encourage like drugstores and grocery stores into blighted areas. Well, riverfront property right here in downtown Aurora is not a blighted area. It's a very, very prime area. And these guys, and instead of that money that you collect getting put to these taxing bodies, it goes back to the people for development purposes. So we have a casino that's moving, it's getting its second TIF, another 20-year TIF, a multi-billion-dollar casino. And it's moving to the place it has to move, which is right off the interstate, because these casinos, too many of them in Aurora, in Illinois now, you have to have like a Vegas convention, entertainment, big hotel type business for it to be viable. And of course, what a quinky-dink. These people benefiting from it also support Richard's campaign and have poured money into the aldermen's campaigns who voted for this. And so my friend John Lash got himself 2 years ago elected as alderman at large, and he is often the lone vote on city council. Now, privately, people are telling him that they would vote with John if he were mayor, but Richard is he's vindictive and they're worried about their wards. So anyway, they've made this election. So suddenly we have no money in John Lash's campaign. Oh, his campaign manager, she's doing it completely pro bono. But this flyer here got sent out by the Illinois Democratic Party. Oh, yeah. This is Pritzker's. This is Pritzker, people. Now, Pritzker's the billionaire governor that bought his election a few years ago. I mean, he spent $70 million. He's from the Hyatt family. So they are very, very wealthy people. And so anyway, he spoke at the convention. He said, I'm a real billionaire. Yeah, Donald Trump's a fake billionaire. Yeah. Okay, this is just cartoonish, all of it. But the thing about it is they don't have he doesn't have any connection with all this old Democratic politics, and he's not connected to the Chicago machine. He's not connected to the Madigan machine down in Springfield, which is tanking as indictments keep rolling in. So it's I think this is going to be very interesting because this is MAGA versus progressive, not MAGA versus the Democratic Party. And John is, there's no mention of John in this flyer. Richard was one of the people that was speaking right before Trump spoke at the Republican National Convention. And he's touting that. So, everybody freaking out over, oh, it's going to raid our schools. Well, I said, you can do something about it. And any effort you make locally is going to have way bigger effect than, giving to some Democrats in the Congress and hoping this time for sure they're going to take it to Trump. How about that Chuck Schumer, huh? Fighter.
Oh, God.
What do you think of this, Professor John?
Well, at least we have a vigorous, really spirited opposition to Trump and the Republicans in the Democratic leadership. It's not like they're a bunch of elderly zombies that are
that just rolled over. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think it was, Schumer and the Democrats just didn't want to exert any energy. They didn't want to make a case for opposing what Trump and the Republicans are doing.
Because, that's the less they have to do.
I think they're trying to argue that it's a kind of rope-a-dope strategy that Trump will just simply implode from all of the crazy crap that he's doing. I don't think that's true. I mean, he has a plan, and unfortunately, other people wrote it for him.
His life is a tsunami of crazy crap. I mean, when is that waiting for the crazy crap to get to Trump been a decent strategy? I mean, that's what he lives off of. As a matter, my mother said, I think the wisest thing about last year. She says, if people just stop talking about Trump, it's like he would have no popularity. Yeah, I think there was like a episode of the original Star Trek that touched on something like that. Oh, look at him, children. He feeds our future. as almost every one of life's conundrums, there is an episode of the original Star Trek that deals with deep philosophical issues undergirding it. So
Although John has moved past that, we're now almost to the era of the gold press latinum. So their money will still be involved. Money is still involved in politics now.
Yeah, so you should join us, Marianne, for the Star Trek: The Next Generation and Adnan. So we're
Well, is that coming up after this hour, or is it on?
yeah on Sunday, Sunday
Oh,
at 5 p.m.
maybe I can jump on.
Sunday.
Yeah, okay. Maybe I can jump on at that point. No, this is yeah, life is a little crazy over here. I've been helping to overseeing the dismantling of a particle accelerator, and next week I'm going to be overseeing the crating of it and the store
Oh, you're storing it? You're putting it
no,
away?
we are shipping it to Italy. That's going to be
Cool.
we
Cool.
have this, my company has built an ion source that's more powerful than any of this kind in the world. And when I went to look at the lab that we were selling it to about a year and a half ago up in Brasimone, very beautiful mountain town, and it's kind of northern Italy up in the mountain. It looks kind of like Colorado up there, actually, but
Mhm.
not as high. So I'm thinking there's just like a little mini Fermi lab, a real modern accelerator. I get to this place. This place was abandoned because they had built this big, enormous structure to house a big nuclear power plant, and they cut the program. But it's got this kind of big, archy, Byzantine big dome structure. And I'm like looking in this place going, this looked like it was abandoned in the 1600s sometime. What the hell? They've since kind of like, fixed up the interior, put, a lot more infrastructure in there and painted the walls and things like that. But damn, that's what we're doing.
It looks
Cool.
like Joe has a dish, two dishes.
Oh my.
Yes, it came together quite quick. They these take about 10 minutes to cook fully. They're the walls of the vegetable are quite tough.
Oh,
Not quite as tough as bitter melon, but pretty close. And they stay juicy on the inside and firm on the outside. That's why they have this kind of olivey feel. And then I've got some slightly overcooked taro root. Um, Pressure cooker was a little bit faster than I expected, but we tossed the taro root in mustard seed oil with mustard seeds, chili, and curry leaves,
Mm.
and a little bit of hing. And this one was seasoned with the ivy gourd was seasoned with cumin and ginger. And for Walter's sake, I threw in a little bit of cilantro in his absence. So I could take the liberty.
so
Well,
taro root, is that like potato? Does that have the texture or feel of a potato?
Yeah,
You
it's
said,
a similar. It's a little bit more creamy, but
okay.
yeah, it's a tuber, a tropical tuber. Not quite as poisonous as uh, cassava.
Oh dear.
Although you should wear rubber gloves or something to protect put oil on your fingers while you're taking off the skin because it can irritate your skin.
mm, I'm hungry again. Damn it.
Is that
Yeah.
where the toxin is located in the skin, or is it
Well,
in the
it's constant.
flesh as well?
Yeah. Well, I guess in the taro root, it's the skin. With the cassava, it's kind of throughout. Only
Have to
to
prepare it
how
in a certain way.
or yeah. Mhm. How they determined that you could eventually eat it is amazing. Must have taken a lot of deaths over the years.
That's a heck of a breakfast there, Joe.
Oh yes. I get to share it with a few others. But they're
Oh.
when they get back from their exercise regime.
So how long are you in India?
We're not quite sure. We have a 30-day visa,
Oh, so this is
but
just traveling.
but
This was.
we're slowly making.
Hmm.
Yes, well, I don't want to divulge too much on the tubes. We can talk about it later. It's good to see everybody.
Good to be seen.
It's very good.
Good to be back in the saddle with my posse.
Yeah, not kidding.
And we didn't even get into Trump's tariffs and the resulting Canadian nationalism, but like was a real shocker.
No.
Or Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia student who
Oh,
was
God.
grabbed off the streets of New York and taken to a
Disappeared.
hidden
Disappeared.
Yes,
They took him to
disappeared.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we should we could talk about those too. I
Are
don't know
you
what
seeing
level on the
ramifications already?
sorry.
Or are you seeing ramifications of the tariffs already up
Oh,
there?
yes. I mean, we are, and it's even more than dramatic price rises. It's just the panic that they've caused,
Mm,
and the
true.
decision making of trying to, uh, you know, import things that you're going to need before the tariffs come in, and then not sure actually are those tariffs going to be imposed or not. Now you've got like 500 tons of like some good that like and the prices then fall, and so there's just complete chaos in trying to deal with it. But it is also politically very salient that it may be the only thing that rescues the liberal federal government from a Trump-like
Mm,
conservative figure who looked to be
mm.
leading and absolutely sure to win, and still probably, I think, will win. But right now, standing up to Trump-style politics is good. Is good politics because Canadian nationalism is kicked in. There's boycotts. I was at a committee meeting and I happened to mention that I have a trip coming up. Been invited to give a talk, and I have a board of trustees meeting that I'm attending, and I want to see my parents, so I'm going to California.
Mm.
And I just mentioned that, I'd be going to California, and everybody around the table was like, "Are you sure you should be doing that?" Like I'm judging whether, because they're taking this boycott idea seriously. I couldn't believe it that
Oh,
people were really trying to pressure me to like not visit my 80-year-old parents in these states because like, well, we shouldn't really be going, and and there's a lot of people who are buying are avoiding buying US goods. I actually think that's quite a healthy thing. In the
Mm.
BDS movement, there's, boycott, divestment, and
mm.
sanctions of
Mhm.
boycotting, Israeli goods and so on. But actually, why haven't people been boycotting the United States, for
Mm.
more of recent history? Obviously, it's because it's very difficult, or used to be very difficult. Now I think maybe you could boycott the United States and still find alternatives anywhere you wanted for most things. It's more difficult for Canadian, economy that is right next
You're not
door.
going to be growing. I don't know. Maybe you can grow strawberries in December up in
Well,
Alaska.
yeah,
Maybe
Hydroponic.
some
ever heard of
oranges.
a thing called a greenhouse,
Nah.
Yeah,
Macy?
yeah. Hey,
I- do,
But
do they have
aren't you
an
gonna
alternative? Do they have an alternative to Bud Light up there?
Yeah, I don't know.
Labatt's?
Actually,
Hey.
I'm not a drinker, but
You can smuggle California wines back in there and
yeah,
arbitrage them,
right.
Adnan.
yeah, yeah. You can have little border running business there.
Yeah.
That's true.
And
It used
French
to go
wines
the other
into the
way.
US.
Yeah, there you
Sorry.
go.
You could smuggle French wines into the US if Trump puts 200% tariffs on them.
That's true.
Mm.
That's true. Well, actually, what I would do is just get Quebec wine and bring it in. Silly Americans wouldn't know the difference, it's in
There we go.
French.
As long as it's got a French label, you're set.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm quite curious, how long is it going to take before real effects start being seen in terms of the economy regarding, for example, food supply and ice taking away most of the people that pick the vegetables? Are
Well,
we
we're not
seeing
fully into a
anything already?
We don't know. I mean, I haven't noticed anything in the grocery stores, and of course,
Mm,
there's not just the regular grocery stores. There's the supermercados here, which is where the Mexicans shop around here, and those are great. I mean, you get there's fruit and vegetables I can't even identify at these
mm,
places. They're a
cool.
good bargain, and they don't have packaging, so they can, you sort of buy in bulk, and it's more vast market. But I haven't seen not yet. Um I don't know. We have to, I think you have to go through
Speaking of variety and unpackaged vegetables, and walk out the door here, and there's a street market full of fresh vegetables that have
Ah,
basically not traveled very far from the field
yeah.
and have never been refrigerated. And coming from Norway, that is so glorious. Not have refrigerated food. The flavor, it's just like everything it tastes great. Overwhelming,
No, when I went to
overwhelming power.
Peru, oh man, years and years ago, I mean, it was like you haven't really tasted food before. They have
mm,
such a variety of corn in every conceivable shape and color over there. Variety of tables and potatoes in every conceivable shape and color. I had
mm.
my first tree ripened banana. It's just like, you really
Oh,
get spoiled after
glorious.
a while. But I think what's been going around here is like they've got farm to table type. There a lot of restaurants around here are growing their food like indoors. Some of them, like at least there's one restaurant called The Hardware, has a year-round herbal garden in their restaurant, and they also
Mm.
have fields on the outside. I know that Detroit talked about doing it like back in 2009 after the first big, recession, but I think they're really doing it now. And there's like, because the one thing that wasn't available for years in the city of Detroit was a grocery. It was a major grocery store.
Mm.
I mean, it was literally a
Mhm.
food desert for a long time. So people have been really pushing the urban farming. And
Yeah.
I actually, as an environmentalist, I always thought that, I can sort of see the north-south trade in food because, you're not going to be we get when you have fresh strawberries and raspberries in January, they're not coming from Michigan, they may
Mm,
be coming from California. But if you're up in Canada, I mean, you're really the north-south trade, but the east-west trade, it's distorted so many economies, like, a place like California that's growing almonds, which I think require more water per,
mhm,
cubic yard than any other nut. And they do that for political. I mean, people start growing, they get big tax breaks, and then they get a bigger claim on water rights. And this is, they play these games all the time. And, you know, eh, yeah, I mean, Trump is just going to go through like a bull in a china shop. And the Democrats have proved themselves so hapless that I'm hoping that people thinking now I've had fun with John's campaign here, but John Lash, we're getting back to Aurora, but he's dead serious about how we solve the homeless problem around here, how we solve the chronic unemployment. The current mayor just wants to get more restaurants and bars downtown. He's given tips to people uh making apartments out of old buildings that are going for $1,500 for a one-bedroom apartment. Nobody can afford that around here, that kind of stuff.
mm.
John wants to, show what a Green New Deal really would look like at the city level, at the local level. And, as I said, he's connected to national networks of people that are trying to rethink urban environments, trying to, have a kind of like an urban architecture and ground architecture that is maximally sustaining. And that's, getting high density, off-street parking, lots of walkways, things that kind of countering like 70 plus years of urban sprawl in our districts. And, it's a real problem out here. I mean, I'm looking at a place that was built like 30 years ago. It's like way in the horizon when I go out to Sugar Grove. I said, this is going to be like a ghetto. It already kind of is. I said, nobody's going to want to live here in these homes that were originally priced at $300,000 and are mostly vinyl. So just not near any place. So, there's just, I don't know. It's pretty clear that our politics have to evolve. And, I try to tell people, hey guys, Bernie Sanders was the compromise. Bernie Sanders' policies was the big compromise. And the Democrats, they only play stupid. Man, when it comes to a big threat to their power, they could get it together and stop Bernie Sanders twice. They can get it together and stop Nina Turner. They can get it together. I mean, they could rehab a completely corrupt politician in Cleveland and get the entire squad to endorse her over Nina Turner. That was a real hat trick. I mean, they are ruthless when it comes to this. And I don't know if, just as an amusement, Bree, this woman who has a podcast, had Jamal Bowman on her show.
Yeah.
Joy Bree, and it was revealing. I mean, his mentality. And at one point he did get her, said, well, why do you, when you had the votes, when she had narrow margins and you could have forced something, not everything, you could have forced like a minimum wage, you could have forced massive like student debt, you could have forced a lot of things. And he just sits there looking at her and says, were they really that afraid of Nancy Pelosi? And he goes, well, yeah. And he just sort of said it. He just kind of admitted it. And but why? Well, these they look helpless and hapless, and Nancy Pelosi sometimes looks uh, half demented. Maybe she is, but it doesn't matter. They understand power. Those people understand power, and they've used it. I mean, they got the squad to heel like completely. And so it's like we've got to start doing counter examples of governance on the more local level, because that's stupid. They can't control every single, election in every single county and city and things like that. So, I don't know what else I can tell people. Except we've
Well,
got
at least you're part of the system. I mean, are you gonna, or when are you up for election
Oh,
again?
I'm on the ballot again, and I'm running unopposed. I mean, a couple of
Cool. Excellent.
even
Excellent.
I actually have
What do your chances look like?
pretty damn good. I won in
It's
a
touch and go.
landslide. I
Yeah.
won in a landslide last time. I actually got more votes than John Lash did in his run for mayor.
Oh
I
dear.
didn't get, but Park
Why
District's
aren't
really
you
big.
running for mayor?
Yeah, there you go.
Don't want that headache. Besides which, I'm trying to help my boss save the world with this subcritical nuclear reactor.
Oh,
I
you can
should.
do that on the weekends. Come
Yeah,
on.
I know. Well, we're kind of doing it on the weekend because I have a day job trying to get this accelerator off to Italy. But it's yeah. Sometime I think later I'll tell you about the visit that Raul and I had with this billionaire dude. Uh, was trippy, really trippy. We
Ooh,
yeah,
tune
we
in
spent
next time for the
yeah. I
dish.
mean. It was very
Be at
interesting.
Davos next year?
This guy, I'm sure does. This guy, like one of the cool billionaires, there is no such thing. There's just a yin yang sort of like a type of billionaire. But he did have the Dalai Lama stay at his home in Syracuse for 6 weeks last year, recovering from knee surgery. So,
Wait, he's a billionaire
neat.
and he lives in Syracuse.
yeah,
Something does
that's his
not add
hometown.
up,
No, that's his
okay,
hometown.
in this story.
That's his hometown. And you know who else lives in Syracuse is Richard Gere. He's from Syracuse.
Oh, wow.
And his
Wow.
my son is a producer, and I think that they like, so there's definitely the Richard Gere has been a big advocate of Tibetan causes for
Yeah.
decades. So he's a
Mm.
personal friend of the Dalai Lama, so that's how they connected.
I see.
But no, I've seen
Ah.
he showed me pictures of him and the Dalai Lama and his whole entourage at his house. That house is very nice. Yeah, that's a very nice place. But
Hmm.
anyway, it's just I have to give this guy credit though. He had us on his yacht for hours. And I think it's because, these guys, I imagine if you're a billionaire, you've got people kissing your butt morning, noon, and night, and you don't really see normal people a lot that will just tell you something different than what you're doing.
Mm.
And so
I
he's
don't know.
suddenly gotten pro-nuclear and he wanted to know, is there anybody that is not a crackpot that has absolutely revolutionary, technology, and our company does.
Mm.
But I told him point blank, he asked me, well, what's stopping you? I says, well, there's problems with nuclear energy. I mean, it's an oligarch. It commercialized way too soon 70 years ago. And a
Mm.
bunch, several defense contractors came in with their variations of the light water reactor, and that's been the nuclear industry ever since. You can't crack.
Mhm.
I mean, complete, regulatory and governmental capture and all this political, insiderism, and they don't know how. And I said, and it really can't be, though, government. I told him it can't be some billionaire like just, coming up with a great idea. No, Tony Stark doesn't exist in this universe. He can't just do shit. And by the way, another good thing about this current climate, got so tired of friends of mine like idolizing Elon Musk for years.
Oh,
I'm going,
God.
this is a billionaire knucklehead. He hasn't invented one damn thing ever, I mean, yeah, some of the stuff like SpaceX stuff is cool, but that's stuff that other people have invented.
Hmm.
I mean, I hate to tell you that China and Russia have that technology. If you want to go see, I mean, Brian Berletic a few months ago had a whole big episode, devoted
Mm.
to going through that. But, it's like, no, he isn't some Tony Stark superhero. God, well, now everybody's kind of, seeing what a jackass this guy is, It's,
Wow, some interesting stories there, Marianne. I mean, it's been a while since we chatted,
yeah.
but I'm really disappointed to see that this is just another classic case of a politician hanging around with the billionaires.
Oh, I know. I know. I will never get the taint off me. And I even had to comment on the interior design of his boat because I'm expecting something gauche. And I'm going, God damn, this guy is taste. Oh, God damn, I already ate this guy. He's got such taste. And it's like, but I'll have to say, these guys do live in a rarefied, I mean, these guys live in a rarefied atmosphere. And it's just, and he was very surprised to find out I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. He says, huh, how could you be a Bernie Sanders supporter? Because he's absolutely right about critical things that have to change about this country. And, and they kind of settled down and had to agree. Well, his son was there. His son is a movie producer, and he kind of was like 100% on my side. He said, yeah, I love Bernie. Like,
There
So
you go.
when is he going to fund your campaign for Congress?
yeah,
Yeah.
right. No, I'm going to have to kill him first. Someone said that. I mean, it's like, I'd have to, it's like this would be no good. It would be no good, as my old great grandmother would say. And but it's just but it was interesting to see how these guys were thinking. And when they were very distraught about, the latest results of the last election, I said, "Hey, look, people in my neighborhood, things didn't get better under Biden." and they were sort of okay under Trump up into COVID, and COVID was just something that kind of disconnected the whole world for a while. So they were expecting everything to get better, or at least restore to where it was. And it's and so one of his guys says, "Why do you live in that neighborhood?" I said, "I don't know, because I can afford a Victorian mansion where I couldn't afford a 2-bedroom condo just 8 miles up the river." I mean, it's like a cool place. But these guys just they think weirdly. And I said, people in my neighborhood are like, they're doing okay. I mean, in terms of like, there's just as smart of kids coming in up on my neighborhood as anywhere else. And because people actually have to do their own plumbing around here and their own wiring and a lot of their own car repair, I would say this was the kind of culture that existed, in farms in the 1930s where, those farm boys who ended up, getting drafted to World War II. And they worked on their own cars, they worked on their own trucks, they worked on their own equipment, they knew how to build things. And, I I don't know. I think since the Reagan era, there's been this feeling among the professional managerial class, as our friend Catherine Liu would call them, that you can just manage. We could just be a nation of managers. And with Excel spreadsheets, and just that, and the world will pay us huge salaries for the benefit of our insight that way. It's just um, it's kind of nuts. But I think long term, US will be put in its place because the rest of the world they can't dominate. We can't dominate. Not us, the military industrial complex. But we've got two oceans and Mexico on one side and Canada hey, on the other side. And we're gonna be fine. We can grow our own food. We can actually produce our own energy. We it, long term, I think we'll be fine. Short term, things will get a little dramatic. Yeah.
Yes, a little traumatic.
Yeah.
Here's
Well, it
to the
always
drama.
is.
No,
But I
we're
mean, I've been so frustrated by, the glacial movements. Even I was right before COVID, I was invited to a Union of Concerned Scientists meeting discussing alternative energy. I was brought there because of our company, and none other than the real Jerry Brown himself was leading that one discussion. And I was sitting there, and there's Bill Foster and then Sean Casten, our local congressman, being a couple putzes. And, it's like I was waiting patiently my turn, but it was like, these are profoundly unserious people. And I waited my turn and said that. You guys, you say this is an existential crisis. Nothing that you've been talked about gives us any indication of that. Like what, tax incentives for Teslas that no one in my neighborhood would be able to afford to buy new. I mean, I just was shaking my head and I was just raking them over their coals. Where's the World War II scale, kind of effort to completely modernize let's not talk about anything in particular, just modernizing the energy grid. I mean, there is a run in my house and it's right under where I'm sitting from the 19th century, old, like the earliest type of wiring. I've got it disconnected from thing, but I still kind of want it live, kind of insulated because it's kind of like a living fossil down there, you know. Who knows? American Horror Story, season 14. What was that? Long distance. Distance telegraph.
well, well, that's happening. Trump threatens the Canadians about the grid, and he's just totally clueless about how much electricity is being purchased by the US from Canada. It's just there's just
totally
dimwits.
He's just totally clueless. He said something, and I can't remember what it was. I kind of burst out laughing, but it was so dumb. It just kind of reminded me of like when George W. Bush would talk about the inner tubes, or I see the Googles. I see these guys, they just don't have a clue about anything.
Well, that's the trouble, though. We're on the brink of a recession, and if you're old enough, we've lived through several
Mhm.
recessions, so it's not quite as cataclysmic. But people will get hurt and
People,
need to have a
well,
plan.
and we do. However, as I was pointing out to these guys, it says, some people around here never got out of the recession, in 2009. I
Hmm.
mean, there was not a recovery. The banks were made whole, you
Hmm.
know, millions of people were not made whole. And, back in the Feldo, I said, the way COVID was rolled out. Now, ironically, part of the reason why Trump was voted out, because a lot of people were very unhappy with the shutdowns and everything.
Hmm.
It was, people, we did not go through this all together. I mean, the people, as Catherine Lou would say, read email for a living, those of us would still getting our paychecks, but oh God, we can't do the Morion conference is canceled this year. Oh, woe is us. But people, half of my friends around here were like, small businesses and wait staff and service, and they had a very rough time. And, and it still hasn't come back entirely. I mean, restaurants still aren't open quite the hours that they had been before. It's
Hmm.
hard. People, people couldn't just go into cold storage for 15 months, and then come out. I mean, people moved. They had to like sell their car or move in with their parents or go back
Hmm.
to school, do something, so it was not everybody was, it was not negative all around, but it was hard. And, it was very disruptive to people. And, probably the best thing we could have done was, just pay people salaries to stay home, whoever they were.
Hmm.
And, if Trump hadn't been so stupid, I mean, if he'd done like one or two more things right, he would have been had a second term. We would have been done with him already. But, he's a knucklehead and he's out of it, or he just doesn't even care. I mean, I don't know what goes on in Trump's head, but
No, he's getting his 2 days a week on the golf course, and
yeah.
that's really all he cares about. I mean, truly, he's still managing to get 2 days of golf
Oh,
in every damn
and why
week.
not? I mean, that was the center of his universe down there. I mean, he did buy this distressed property and they had to keep it kind of, historic. And so he had the idea of like, oh, instead of just mansion, this will be a business, so it turned into this resort area.
Mm.
Yeah. And that was kind of, look, it's the center of the universe. And I have no doubt that Paul Pelosi Jr. is once again going to be hanging out on New Year's Eve party with Ivanka and Jared and all those people. Like when I show people the picture of Nancy Pelosi's son with his arm around Ivanka, back a few years ago at Mar-a-Lago, they were just kind of stunned. And I said, come on, they all know each other. Trump was a Democrat until about 10 years ago. They
Well,
all know
and
each other and they party with each other. And
they truly do. It truly is incestuous,
yeah,
considering that Tiger Woods is now dating Donald Trump Jr.'s first wife. So that's kind of where we are. That's just,
and
you know,
Gavin Newsom's ex-wife is now Don Jr.'s, what is it? Are they married now or the fiance?
oh,
I don't.
no, I don't think so. But she is our ambassador to Turkey or Greece, whatever it is. Yes, Greece, I think.
I mean, it's just like, the big club that we aren't in. I mean, it's just yeah. And as I said, I don't yeah, the only thing that changes it is real political pressure from the outside. I was holding out some hope that, the Justice Democrats would do like Kyle Kalinske, said they were going to do. They were going to be the progressive version of the Tea Party. That, these guys that made John Boner's life hell drove him to being a 4 o'clock Merlot drinker, and or earlier, poor guy. But no, that just didn't happen. And um, I think the system and the pressures are just too great, to unless you're a real mature iconoclast with your own, kind of army on the outside. maybe, the only one I think of, and I don't agree with his politics at all, but the only one that seems to be standing on any principle is Massey, Thomas Massey.
Mm.
I'm going to be
Yes,
visiting his office again. It's part of the Fermilab group going down to Washington next month.
Thomas Massey and his M60 machine gun, right? He's one of I think he's the only member of Congress who owns a machine gun, an actual machine gun. It's
Is
just
that
a
when
little
I thought the
bizarre.
actual machine gun, I don't know technically what the difference is, but I think machine guns are still technically not legal. But like
No,
the A415s or the AR-15s are some kind of semi-automatic something or other.
yes,
That
that's
it
true,
has
but
some difference than a machine gun, but he's got a real machine gun.
an actual machine gun. This is the M60 machine gun.
Ah.
It's there's no assault rifle about it. It's an actual machine gun.
Oh,
Well,
oh,
it's the one he has in his Christmas photo, right? Remember, he does
oh,
Christmas
that's
cards,
right. Yeah,
and
that guy.
and
Yeah,
has his entire
that's him.
family, armed up. It's pretty weird.
Yeah, but I have to remember it was kind of like Ron Paul. Um,
Oh,
you'd listen to that guy for about 15 minutes, and if he's talking about the war on drugs or like the forever wars, you're going, hey, yeah, this guy is making a lot of sense. I kind of like him. You listen
we're
to him for more than 20 minutes and you go, I don't know, this guy's a little nuts. But
indeed. I'm Adnan has to go, and perhaps we've come to an end.
oh, I'm sorry. Well,
Exhausted our talk, exhausted our topics. Oh, just wanted to mention the schedule. I
mhm.
believe on Saturday we have, in addition to weekly marks, Susanna was going to be showing my favorite year. Not sure if Susanna's here, if she wanted to mention something about it.
Oh, yeah, thank you,
Yes.
And
Joe.
of
Yes,
course,
yeah,
yeah.
this is from 1982. I've got a gorgeous print I'm streaming from TCM. It stars Peter O'Toole in his Oscar-winning, sorry, I wish, but Oscar-nominated performance. And it is based on a true story by Mel Brooks when he was a junior writer for Sid Caesar, and he was assigned to babysit Errol Flynn for a week, who was the guest on the show. So I hope you can join us at 7 p.m. Tomorrow night.
Okay.
It's outro time. James, if you're still here, let me thank
Oh,
Marianne
and
and
I
Adnan
am.
and John
Thank you. It's a
Oh,
pleasure to
thank
be
you
back
guys.
with you.
everyone.
and
Wonderful.
Joe and Food, and I hope
Oh, yeah.
we do this again. We have to do this again.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great to see you.
Bye.
See you guys.